Hi friends, my name is Sarah, and I'm currently the Intentional Interim Minister with St. Andrew's United Church in Lacombe, Alberta. If you're watching this video, it means that you received the link via the email letter that I sent out to the St. Andrew's Community of Faith. Or you might have found it via our website, or our Facebook page, or even this channel itself. No matter what brought you here, welcome. My husband John has graciously shared his YouTube channel, The Accessible Faith Project, with us during this pandemic time as a way and a place to share my weekly reflections with you. There are other videos on this channel which are an opportunity to learn more about the Bible, faith questions, and the like. If you'd like to receive notifications of when new videos are posted, you can do so by clicking on the little bell icon that says subscribe and signing up. It's completely free. As we continue to follow Jacob's story from the book of Genesis, this morning's reading from chapter 32 and 33 envisions him on his way home, back to the land of his ancestors, the land that his father had given him, and the land that God had promised him. More importantly, he's on his way back to everything that he had stolen from his big brother Esau. He had even profited from being a fugitive. While working for his uncle Laban wasn't exactly pleasant, Jacob still managed to marry two of his daughters and cheat his way to prosperity. He had left his childhood home on the run with nothing but the shirt on his back, and he came back like a prosperous tribal chief, with wives, children, servants, and livestock, as big as a small army. The problem is, he sees Esau coming to meet him with 400 armed men. And so then Jacob prays. And this is the longest prayer that appears in the book of Genesis. But we need to remember that this is Jacob the trickster who is praying. He reminds God that God has promised to do him good. He calls himself not worthy, but he concludes that he has in fact become two companies worthy of God's consideration. Jacob says that he is afraid of the murderous Esau, but concludes his prayer in the same way that he began it, reminding God of God's promises, expecting God to hold up the divine end of the bargain. However, Jacob does not completely give up hope that even Esau might have his price. And so he offers him extraordinary presents from his considerable holdings: goats and ewes and rams, camels and their colts, cows and bulls and donkeys. And these gifts are presented one at a time, leaving space between each drove. And Jacob thinks to himself, I may cover his face with this present, which precedes my face, and afterwards I will see his face, and perhaps he will lift my face. Basically, with this myriad of gifts, Jacob is hoping to make Esau forget his anger and be dazzled by the wealth of his brother. With the bribe having been sent to Esau and all of his company now across the ford of the river, Jacob finds himself alone. And he has another mysterious encounter. A man wrestles with him until the breaking of the dawn, and just before the dawn breaks, the stranger dislocates Jacob's hip and demands to be let go. But Jacob insists that he will not let go until he receives a blessing. The stranger asks for his name, and for the very first time, Jacob is completely honest. He replies, Jacob, my name is Jacob. It means liar and cheater. It means that I'm no good. I took something valuable from my brother and from my father a long time ago, and now. And the stranger's arms become less of a grapple and more of an embrace. And he says to Jacob, you shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have striven with God and with humans, and you have prevailed. Jacob's tale of wrestling with a stranger reminds me of the story of Carl from the Disney movie Up. Seeing what he thinks is his last chance to live out his dreams, Carl, the balloon salesman, ties thousands of balloons to his house to set off for the Amazon rainforest. However, on his porch is 8-year-old wilderness explorer Russell, who is hoping to help Carl in order to earn an explorer badge. Without giving away too much of the movie, Carl wrestles with his identity of being a grumpy old man into being one with a new lease on life, thanks in part to Russell being in his life. Like Jacob, and like Carl, many of us have had times when we wrestled with who we are. Some of us have even felt attacked by God, or for that matter, beat up by life, the universe, and everything. Many of us have felt that the negotiation of our relationship with God has been nothing but a struggle and a fight. And that fight has not always been because God is trying to get us to do something and we've been resisting. But at times it has seemed that we were striving with all of our hearts and all of our strength to draw near to God, to be what God wanted us to be. But God has seemed shadowy and elusive and uncooperative. And many of us too, I think, can witness that our greatest blessings, as well as our deepest scars, came from the one and same experience. Whether it be the death of a loved one, or the breakdown of a marriage, or a life-threatening illness. The events that inflict upon us wounds that leave us limping for the rest of our lives have at times been the events that we also look back at with a measure of gratitude for the way that they have reshaped us and have borne fruits of grace within us that would not otherwise have been possible. And as we recognize that we often see in those same events the unmistakable fingerprints of God, not in the sense that God caused these things to happen, but rather in the way that those events ended up being used in our lives. When Jacob finally catches sight of his brother and realizes he indeed has 400 men with him, Jacob does something that I think is very brave. This time, instead of playing the coward, instead of hiding behind his wives and his children, he tells them all to stand back while he goes on himself to meet Esau, alone and defenseless. Jacob leads them out, and in front of Esau, he bows before him 7 times, not knowing what will happen next. For me, this is the pinnacle of the story, the surprise that nobody expected. For Esau runs to meet Jacob, he embraces him, he kisses him, and he weeps. Until now, throughout Genesis, we've only experienced Esau through Jacob's trickery and his subsequent fear. But the wonder of Esau is that he has completely forgiven his trickster, wretched brother. He cares nothing for the material goods that Jacob has offered, only that he has his brother. If Jacob or any one of us wondered whether the one Jacob had encountered at the river Jabbok was God, here Jacob has no doubts. When Esau asks Jacob why he has sent half of his property as a gift to him, Jacob replies, "For truly to see your face is like seeing the face of God." He thought that he had seen the face of God at the river in the person of his wrestling partner. He had thought to appease the face of Esau by buying his favor, by hoping that Esau would want to lift his face in acceptance. But Jacob had been wrong all along about where one sees the face of God. In other words, whatever blessing Jacob may have received at the river Jabbok for the asking, he saw it lived out in the tear-drenched face of his long-lost brother Esau, a blessing that was his only because it was given. The love of God and the love of a long-estranged brother belong together. We can no more separate them then we can stand apart from the person every one of us is meant to be. For Jacob's story is our own story. It's a story of such incredible grace that we can never anticipate. It's a story that we will struggle with our whole lives, or at least until we come to realize this truth, that we can never find what we really need until we find it in the face of those from whom we are estranged. Whether they are a brother or sister, a former friend, or even from God. Reconciliation comes from a love that knows no bounds, a love that is willing to look past wrongs and faults. By God's grace, no wound is too deep, no scar is too sore to stand in the way of rebuilding that which was once lost, and of seeing God's face in one another and in ourselves. Thanks be to God. Amen.